So in this session, we have some panelists with us today, some guests. Three very special guests that I'm so excited to have with us. We've been working with these people now for a little bit of time. They're all members of the collaborative, all members of our steering committee at FLCODE, and have really just been an awesome group of people for me to interact with over the last year or two. And today the goal is that, hey, we've got these people representing these organizations. I'm going to introduce them in a second. But they've all had various levels of experience with EdFi. Their organizations have had different levels of experience and years of experience with EdFi. Some brand new. So they all have those, like, fresh ideas in their head of, like, what occurs when something doesn't work, or because, we're not here to say that everything is 100% rosy and perfect and all that kind of thing. This is a session to be honest and true and really ask us anything. Questions ranging from, like, hey, how did you get started, to just whatever you can think of. So I want to, I'll allow each of these people in our sessions to introduce themselves. We'll start with Leon County Schools. I believe we have two from Leon joining us today, two people. So we have Brian Boyd and Lakita Eckstein. I hope I said your last name right, Lakita. So Brian, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Boyd. I'm Director of Applications for the Leon County School District. We are a 2020 Michael and Susan Dell Foundation grant recipient, and so the Dell Foundation has been helping us get our EdFi instance set up, and we've been working with the vendor on that and everything like that. And like I said, I'm Director of Applications. My integrations person is Laquita, so I probably wouldn't be able to answer any heavy integrations questions, so I asked Laquita to be here as well. So I will let her go ahead and introduce herself as well.
Good morning, I'm Laquita Eckstein, and as Brian said, I am doing the integrations right now for EdFi, but I'm also responsible for reporting and web development here in Leon County. So hopefully if you have any integrations questions, I can answer them. If I can't, I will find the answer for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian and Laquita. We appreciate you guys being here. From NEFEC, the Northeast Florida Educational Consortium, we have Daniel Hornsby.
Good morning, Daniel Hornsby, Applications Manager here at NEFEC. Been working at NEFEC about 21 years, and we've been doing EdFi probably 7 of those years. So excited to hear what questions we have today.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for joining us. And then from Volusia County Schools, we have Aaron Distler.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Aaron Distler. I am a database administrator here in Volusia County Schools. I've been in my role for about 14 months, or just a couple of months before the pandemic started. So got right into the EdFi conversation. I think I went to my first FLCODE was the last one, and that was just a couple weeks before everything started to shut down. So working on the EdFi integration with our SIS vendor and the progression forward with that project, and then also do a lot of the Power BI and a lot of the data visualizations for whatever the variety of needs for our various departments. So looking forward to hearing everybody's questions and having a good conversation this morning.
Thank you, Aaron. It's good to have you here. One thing I want to mention to everyone before we keep going, at the end we will be doing a giveaway. I'd like everybody to also remember, and if there are any follow-ups to today, there's not a general session at the end. This is kind of the last chance that you'll get to see us. And so if there are any questions you want to follow up with, you can email us at help, H-E-L-P, help at FLCODE, FLCODE.org, help at FLCODE.org. So let's get started. So we have I'll kind of prime the pump, as you say, to ask each of our panelists just a very general question. And it's a very kind of broad question, but hopefully all of you out there, as they say things, if you don't have questions yet, as they say things that spark your ears, write down your questions, and make sure, please don't be shy. It makes our session better the more questions we have. So kind of a little bit of a group responsibility on these Ask Me Anything type sessions. So, but I will kick us off. We'll start with the order of introductions that we had here, and I'll just point to Leon County. But this is the same question I'll ask all of you, is what caused your district to be interested in using the Ed5 data standard? Like, what got you started?
Well, I would say what probably got us started was frustrations over integrations, different data formats. You know, we were trying to feed and roster a lot of different applications and everything like that, and because of that, we got really heavily invested in one roster, and that's kind of what got us started thinking about data standards and everything like that. And then what really got us a lot more interested in it was then, I believe it was either Fades or Famous. We went one year, and Sean Casey was actually the keynote, and so he come and he spoke about Ed5. And then I remember the very first session after that, I was actually presenting on one roster, and Sean actually come to that. And so we ended up spending a lot of time talking to him about that, and then he got us introduced to you, Sherod. And then I remember you reached out to Bill Nimmons, and you come and visit us at the district and everything like that. So that's really how we got really interested in it.
Cool, thanks, Brian. All right, let's go to Daniel at NEFEC.
Hey, ours started about probably 10 or 12 years ago. We're looking for our districts. We're looking for a new SIS ERP package, and we worked with CELT to get that done, and that's where we met Rick. And during all that, we were talking to Rick about operational data, well, actually a data warehouse back then. And our Skyward implementation, student is in one database, and HR and finance is in another. So it was probably 2 years later, Rick reached out and said, hey, are y'all still interested in a data warehouse? Are y'all still having the same issues transmitting data back and forth between third-party applications and Skyward to those applications? And we were. So Rick said, I think I have something that might interest you and save your district some time and get the data moving between applications more securely and more timely. And that's how we first got introduced to Ed5. And Shane Fairbairn and I ran out to Texas for a conference 1 month and met a bunch of other people who were doing it. And that was the kickoff to bringing Ed5 to the NEFEC districts and the conversation with Skyward to get them Ed5 certified so that they could work with us on getting it stood up.
Cool. It's always cool to hear like the history there. Let's pass that on to Aaron from Volusia County.
Yeah, so the original interest predates my time with Volusia County, but as I've heard the story, it started that there was Volusia County had a data warehouse, and there was a lot of various components to that data warehouse that were being utilized kind of across the district. But that data warehouse started to kind of get a little, some constraints weren't there, some other pieces just started to get a bit cumbersome in terms of a data warehouse and maybe not as clean as it could be, which that can bring about some concerns about the trust that you can have in the data that exists, and also the security piece. And so as they were starting to figure out from, what do we do about this? What do we do about this data warehouse and the access to the data? The team at that time was looking at data standards and came across Ed5, and so said, well, let's move forward with the data standard. And at that same time, we were also looking at a new SIS and ERP vendors at that time too. And so that became, with that data standard, became part of the request for proposals for the SIS vendor. And so that was the move, and we've been working on standing that up. The team started working on some of the historical data loads, but then also leveraging the API to try and get our current student data in there. So it was just a need. That frustration, I think, was certainly, echoed from what other people had shared too, that frustration of what access to data looked like And the data is only as good as what you can trust from it. And so with having a EdFi ODS and having that data standard is certainly what we're hoping to build a lot more trust in the data moving forward.
Nice, thank you, Aaron. Yeah, I remember you mentioned there was some a team of people or whatever. You just started there, what, 14 months ago or so. Yeah, I remember working with some of those guys. Good guys. Always loved working with you guys, with Volusia. So I want to open it up to people in the room who've had a chance to kind of meet. And again, you just ask me anything. I could have preloaded questions, but that doesn't really help you per se. Please, if you have any questions, go ahead and unmute yourself. Feel free to ask away.
Hey, Sherod. It's Gabe from PK Young.
Hey, Gabe.
Do you know if there are any districts that are pulling data from Canvas? I see that Mastery Connect is a partner, but it doesn't look like Canvas is.
Yeah. So there's a gentleman. Well, first of all, Brian, Daniel, or Aaron, do you guys have any information with that?
We have Canvas, but we don't pull any data from it yet. So.
Okay. There is you mentioned Mastery Connect. I'm kind of glad you brought that in. Mastery Connect is an EdFi certified assessment platform. They were always kind of this kind of sub company of Instructure, which I believe is kind of the parent company for Canvas, right? Instructure.
That's right.
Recently, as of I think this past year, I think Mastery Connect became more, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they became more integrated with Canvas in some way. Is that right?
That is true, yes.
So there's a gentleman by the name of Mike Blom, Mikeblom, and he is my contact with Mastery Connect. I'm going to actually real quick see what his email is. I think it's a pretty simple email, and that way you can jot this down and reach out to him. Mastery Connect has been doing EdFi for a while. They're an official certified vendor, and they really catch the vision of data standards. To answer your question, I don't think that Canvas is yet integrated with EdFi. I do know that there was I'm going to kind of break the presentation real quick. First, let me give you Mike Blom's email, mblom@instructure.com. So just mblom@instructure.com. So I think the short answer is no, they're not yet integrated. I think there have been some discussions about that. Troy in the general session mentioned, he had a comment about attendance and doing some things for the pandemic that MSDF and EdFi kind of together said, hey, let's tackle this real quick for the pandemic. And I'm going to Google, can you guys see my screen? Can you see what I'm Googling? So I'm going to Google EdFi, and then I'm going to Google, I think it's called like Project Fizz. There wasn't, LMS Toolkit. So maybe a better Google search would have been EdFi LMS Toolkit. And you can see that they have Canvas on here, and Schoology, and Google Classroom. So there has been some work there. I believe they're using Python to kind of do some, but honestly, I haven't actually worked with this. But I did want to at least point you in this so you can at least kind of do a little bit of research, and then feel free to follow up with me if you want, because we could hope maybe schedule a call with some EdFi people. You and we could hop on a call together and talk with them about Canvas. Maybe we could even work with Mike Blom something like that. So cool. Thank you for that question.
Thank
Yeah.
Sure, I can just piggyback on that really quick. With this project Fizz, or the LMS toolkit, because now that they're also, as they're looking at some of the starting kind of starter kits, they also have these toolkits that were built, and this project Fizz that came from grabbing the information from these 3 kind of big LMS platforms was what they called Fix It Fridays as part of EdFi. And so they would bring together, they look for what is a current use case, what is a current pain point for districts, and getting student interaction, student participation during the stay-at-home orders that they found came from these LMS spaces. And so the tools for the LMS for Canvas is utilizing the Canvas API to also populate some kind of other tables. And so it came from just a group of members of the kind of EdFi community coming together once a week and developing a standalone quick little application that they could use that would integrate with the EdFi ODS. And so I just think it's a cool example of, hey, we don't quite have an integration for this yet, but there is a way that the community has tried to still stick to the core of EdFi, but build, just in time applications to meet a current need. So I think this is a really cool one, because especially as someone who is trying to leverage the Canvas API outside of the EdFi ODS to get some student participation data, this was really cool to see.
Were you part of that work, Aaron?
I was not. I got introduced to the Fix It Fridays a little bit later, but after this one was there. But I've gone into their GitHub and looked at some of the API and stuff that they have in the background, and it was pretty cool to see how they did that, and then also would make queries against the EdFi ODS, and just how clean the table structure looks and how clean the queries look because of the way it's put together. So. Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that.
Yeah, thank you. I remember you talked about the Fix It Friday, right? That was the thing that they were, and I joined. I think Daniel joined me on a couple of those, but it was at the beginning. Our bandwidth, summertime got slammed. Anyways, thank you for adding that. Great question. Do we have more?
Sherod, I have a question. This is Lori Butters from Sarasota County.
Yeah.
I was interested in your assessment vendors that are connected to EdFi, and did you mention USA Test Prep was one of them, and iReady?
Yeah, so iReady is USA Test Prep, I believe, was one of the ones that Union County is one of our use cases. Do you remember I guess you were in that last session. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yes.
There was a tool I pulled up called Data Import.
Okay, so I can look at that.
Yeah, there is MSDF is contracted with someone to basically churn out these mappings, these data import mappings, and they are working with Union and myself being involved to do a mapping for USA Test Prep. So I couldn't remember if it was there, but if it's not there yet, then it is on the roadmap to be there pretty soon.
Okay. Well, that's exciting, with the different assessments being out there.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Is that a question maybe for anyone on the panel? I mean, does anyone want to talk about any assessments? Are you guys using USA Test Prep? Maybe not. Maybe a dead end question. It's okay if it is.
Hey, Sherod, the work Emilio's doing is for Suite 3, though, right, of EdFi?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so EdFi Suite 3 is kind of the latest version of the EdFi standard. You mentioned that, Daniel. This would be kind of a good little spot to help everyone kind of figure out how to Google stuff regarding EdFi. If you just Google EdFi Suite 3, this is a site called EdFi Tech Docs, and you can come here. It's this is under the Apache license or something like that. So it's open source. Really, anybody can come here. They can request a login. You can dive right in. You can start doing EdFi. I think if you go to the home screen, yeah, they've recently kind of made a change. So this is the Tech Docs home screen. If you're brand new to this, just click Start here. And I'll kind of walk you through, create an EdFi account, that kind of thing. What other questions? I have another one. Maybe we kind of prime the pump some more. We've talked a little bit. We heard really kind of maybe a use case around Canvas LMS. But I'm curious, as far as the three of you guys that are on here, Brian and the three organizations, we have 4 people here. What is or was the first use case that you started pursuing with EdFi? And I'll kind of set you up with this a little bit. If you're new to EdFi, the use cases are endless. So when you have data, you can do a lot of stuff with it. So it's kind of interesting to always hear, what's the first thing that you tried to do? So we'll start with Leon County.
Well, our initial use case was a discipline dashboard. So we went to Famous a few years ago, about 3 years ago. We remember the DOE was there talking about how they were focusing down on the reporting assessor data and everything like that. And they stressed how the superintendent salary could be garnished if we didn't get the assessor reporting data correct. And so that kind of sparked us to start looking at our discipline data and try to get it a lot more accurate. So that's kind of where we started. We worked on that a few months, but then we got the grant. And so they gave us 4 use cases to apply for the grant. You had to focus on one of those 4 use cases, and we chose to focus on student equity. So that's kind of our new use case. We've kind of switched gears away from discipline, and now we're looking at student equitable access to different programs and technology and teachers and things like that within the district. So that's what we're kind of working on right now and targeting to be finished with in the next few months. So.
Awesome. We'll switch to Daniel at NEFEC.
Hey, I think, because it's been a while and I'm old, I think our first use case per se is when EdFi first kind of rolled out, they had dashboards that they put out there, and our districts had kind of looked at some dashboards, and I guess they were using a couple of vendors, and we thought maybe having the early warning system dashboards would be a benefit for our districts. So I think that was probably our first use case. We ran into issues that the technology that was used made it a little difficult to modify the dashboards to meet the individual needs and requirements of our districts. Then there were a couple other tools out there that did a really good job, so that could get stood up fairly quickly. So we kind of left that. And then a few years ago, EdFi brought a group together to look at use cases. And I think our next big push was Essential Question 24. And those, I'm sure, are published somewhere out there on their webpage. But it basically brought people together across the country to look at various use cases and then drill down into those use cases and figure out how best to implement those in districts. And ours was, I think, Essential Question 24, which was looking at kind of how students perform over time, looking at assessment data. So I think that was our next one. And then now that we've implemented EdFi in our districts, a lot of our use cases are coming from the districts, seeing what data is available, what the operational data store can do for us, how bringing all these different third-party applications into one area and using Power BI to visualize that and do some analytics. Now a lot of our use cases are kind of just coming from the districts that the 15-member districts, identifying areas of need that we're able to assist them with fairly quickly and for free, actually. So I think that's it, unless you can think of something else, Sherod, that I've forgotten.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I think you hit that pretty well. Thank you, Daniel. All right, and then we'll pass it the same question to Aaron.
Yeah, so for us, when the original conversations happened, again, this was prior to me being here, but I know some of the focus was on acceleration and also attendance and discipline too, kind of like the first couple that were coming out in terms of the conversations of implementing EdFi and getting the API and the ODS stood up. And what I think is interesting too, because then, you know, the big pivot or the main thing was moving to, well, we need to get this information in from our SIS vendor into our ODS as a base, right? That you can start to then expand out and start to look at attendance or discipline or the acceleration piece. And that has been the primary focus, is let's get the data in, let's make sure that the data is clean coming into our ODS, so in that way we can start to really build out a particular use case. And with that movement and trying to get the data to come in clean and be valid and valuable, that's when the pandemic hit. And I think the way maybe our use cases are looking forward might shift depending on kind of, you know, where things are at that point once all of our data is there. Because right now it's still, you know, we're still implementing, still getting that integration to work the way we're looking for it to work before we can then start to pull in other data points. But what has been helpful is, as we're implementing EdFi and getting the ODS to where we want it to be, you know, there still has to be stopgaps in place for various offices, that they can't just wait until EdFi is there and good to go to build data visualizations. They have reporting needs. Those reporting needs are changing. And so I think, you know, it's going to be really important as we get EdFi to the point of, okay, now we're going to start using this to report off of and partnering with our vendor, EdGraph, on that. And I know JF is on the call too. You know, that part of that is taking what are these visualizations that we are building and these reports that we're doing for offices outside of EdFi. And I always kind of keep in the back of my mind, what would this look like once EdFi is in place? You know, how would, instead of trying to pull data directly from the SIS, you know, using other ETL processes, what would it look like to be able to query off of the ODS? And so I think some of what our current needs will eventually change those use cases, but I do see attendance and discipline being up there toward the top, and assessment information.
Cool. Thank you, Aaron. Did that spark any questions out there? Anybody have some things they want to ask? I'll sit quiet here for a second.
Hey, Sherod, this is Daniel. I was just going to mention that each of us kind of have our own area that we're looking at. Some of the things we're looking at differ from Leon and Volusia. And I think that's kind of what the community brings, is that, like at NEFEC, we don't have to come up with everything, or Volusia doesn't have to design every visualization. But with the EdFi community, with us having, I don't know if we've talked about the exchange much in the sessions, but EdFi has it at a national level, but Florida also has an exchange to where if NEFEC develops like the human capital portfolio visualization, it's donated back to the exchange for any member. So anything that Leon, I know they're working with EdFi on some analytics and visualizations that whenever those are completed, then they come back to the exchange for the entire community to be able to take that, modify it to work for them, and push it out. So I think that's kind of important for people to understand.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. There's a, if you go to the FLCODE website, FLCODE.org, and then do a / I believe it's resources. You can kind of see some of the resources that have been made available. There are probably more things available than what's listed there, but that'll kind of give you a good base start. I know the other day, I don't know if you were in the last session, but I was talking with Scott. I see Scott's joining us here. Sorry to call you out, Scott. But there's some staff work that NEFEC did, and we shared some of that scripting and stuff with Scott. I don't know if it's going to help him or not, but I definitely made it available so that give him at least a place to start. Did you get a chance to look at that, or not really? Sorry to call you out.
Not any more than where we left off with the data, getting into the database real quickly and outlining all the different data points that we now receive that we couldn't or didn't receive in our old slow way that we're now getting in the new fast way, thanks to EdFi.
But I thank you, Scott, and sorry, but I just really just kind of doing that to highlight kind of what you're saying, Daniel, is the ability to share things out. Okay, more questions.
Hey, Sherod, this is Patrick. I got a couple things to share that NEFEC's been working on that might be beneficial.
Perfect.
One is the College and Career Acceleration Report. And we know that our schools are constantly monitoring grades 9 through 12 to ensure that all students have access to college readiness courses, and they're also concerned about their school grades. So we're able to calculate that in advance for each cohort using EdFi and looking at AP pass rates and participation and CTE. All of those things are integrated into one visualization. And so it's also helpful with master schedule. It's something that we're willing to share out with other districts, and been out to several schools this time of year with master scheduling. It's been real helpful in determining specific courses to teach, and also looking at some programs that we might want to tweak a little bit based on performance data. So that's one. And another one we have in a middle school is looking at correlations between FSA and iReady and all of the assessments that we have available to us now, and doing a side by side, and it's very easy to read, and then also course grade. And so you can see with grading practices, this year, of course, is different, but going into next year and beyond, we're wanting to see how close do those formative assessments line up with actual classroom grades, and then levels as well with FSA. So if a student is a low 3 or a high 2 or a mid 1, what does that mean in terms of those assessments, and then also with the grading. And we also had a recommendation this week that we add for this year, especially attendance. With quarantining, what impact does that have on grades? But that's just a couple of applications that we're working with, and schools really seem to value the flexibility and being able to add different components just kind of on the fly based on feedback from teachers, reading coaches, graduation coaches, and so forth.
Yeah, thank you for that, for letting us. And a lot of that is shareable because a lot of that work has been done on top of EdFi, right? Or
Yes,
at least some of it. Go ahead.
Right.
Sorry.
Yep. If it was being pulled from Skyward, definitely. And Shane would be the person to talk to, because he's kind of the go-to and the help desk and the whatever you need if you want to add something to it. But it really does help with, even now we can calculate for this year's cohort. We know we haven't taken our CT exams or AP yet, but we could tell you exactly what % they're at for this cohort before all those assessments take place. So let's say you're at 45%, you can identify that student population that does not have acceleration, see if they're in a CTE course. Of course, this is too far on the back end. You want to do this much earlier with 10th, 11th graders to ensure that all students have access and have an opportunity to take those assessments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how, I love how what you're saying, in that, because of involving, the EdFi data standard in parts of this work, I think a lot of the, NEFEC districts, I believe, they use various different, applications. But it's cool that, because EdFi being the data standard and kind of a one way of doing it, and I think I mentioned in the previous session, we have a couple of, Leon, Volusia, you guys are working with, what is your SIS? And maybe talk a little bit about your SIS. Daniel, maybe you could talk about your SIS. Just a quick highlight, we're kind of running low on time. I just want to highlight this little feature, that the reason things are shareable is because of doing work on top of EdFi, and that it doesn't matter necessarily the source. Brian and Laquita, what vendor are you guys using for your student information system?
We use Focus.
Okay. And Volusia, you guys also use Focus?
Yes, we also use Focus.
Okay. And then Daniel, a lot of the NEFEC districts that you've been doing EdFi stuff with use Skyward, right?
Right. Most of the districts use Skyward Business, and then I think all but 4 use Skyward Student. So the majority of our work has been working with Skyward to get their data into the operational data store, but then what we're hoping to use is some of Volusia Leon's information once they get Focus stood up and their APIs turned on, then, because we don't actually have a lot of experience with Focus here at NEFEC. We don't support, provide support or host Focus. We do provide tier 1 support and hosting for Skyward. So hopefully we'll be able to learn from Leon and Volusia coming back to that community and stand our other districts up in the operational data store with their Focus data.
So I'll give that opportunity for Leon or Volusia. Do you guys either want to have an update of kind of where you guys are with Focus that you mind sharing?
This is Laquita. I can share from Leon, is that we stood up an EdFi environment from Focus, just because we didn't want to do some stuff with production at this point. But we are pushing data to our ODS, and our ODS, our EdFi ODS is hosted. So we are pushing data to it. I can see the data when I go into Swagger. I can see the data out there. We've had some issues, but one thing I will say is that knowing that Volusia and that NEFEC is working on this, it's been a very good experience. And when I'm looking at something, I'm like, I think this data should be in this field, then I can reach out to everybody and say, hey, I think this data should be in this field, or what are you guys using in this field, or how did you guys, what's being populated, what are your values? And so that's been a really good experience, that we can all talk and we're all can speak the same language, so that when the data is in EdFi, when we all look at it, we are all looking at the same thing. So that's been a great experience so far.
Good deal. Aaron, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would definitely echo what Laquita said. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, there was something that I was noticing about the way some value was being sent, or the way that the API was working. And just to be able to reach out to Laquita and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is the ask that I'm looking to make for Focus to make that update. What do you think? Any concerns you have? Let's talk through this now, so that, because it's something that's going to impact a lot of us, and we were able to kind of come to agreement of, okay, yep, this is the right way to do this, and and I think it put a lot of put some more clout behind that request that, hey, we are collaborating, we are discussing this because, in the end, we want to make sure that it works best for the vendor and for us and the districts. And so, yeah, we're running into a few issues, but right now we're using kind of a sandbox environment to try and get that information and make sure it's working the way we're looking to. And we are certainly seeing some responsiveness to those issues. And so, keep moving forward, one step closer every time.
Well, and the focus integration with Ed5 for Suite 3 is still pretty fresh, right?
It is.
What version of Focus will be, released, integrated with Ed5 Suite 3? What version of Focus?
Yeah, my understanding, and I've heard something different too, but my understanding is, our current sandbox is on version 10, which is the current version that's out there. They are coming out with 11 in the nearish future, but the current Ed5 integration is working on our sandbox, which is on 10. So that's what I've been told will happen moving forward, but I know that there might be some other information out there too.
I've heard the same thing, and we are in that
Yeah.
same position that we're using our current version, which is 10.
Okay.
I thought at one time they said that it would be part of 11 for sure, because I think they're still working on it with us to try to, work out the kinks. I don't know. I'm sure anybody who's on 10, if they want it, probably call them up and get it put on their sites.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which I think even knowing that information, right, and having some people think 11, think 10, we were able to talk. And whenever I had a conversation with someone at Focus, I said, hey, there's these couple of different, ideas as to what this looks like moving forward. Can I get some clarification on that? Which is nice to, again, have people that you can talk to that are experiencing the same thing that you are and get that clarification so we aren't surprised later on.
Yeah. And Daniel, we're at like 11:45. I'll give you a chance to speak real quick if you have anything to say about Skyward Suite 3, and then we'll need to do our giveaway. It's 11:45, so I don't want to keep people hanging too long.
Yes, right now we're not on Suite 3 yet with Skyward, so we've met with them and spoken with them, and based on the needs of our district, we really need Suite 3 for the next fiscal year. We actually need it now, but we've talked to them and gotten commitment that when they do a release 3 times a year. So their June release is supposed to have Suite 3, which doesn't give us a lot of time to get it stood up and implemented. We have it loaded on sandboxes here and on a dev server. We just don't have Skyward data going to it like we want. So hopefully we'll have something in the next little bit from them for Suite 3.
Now you do have Skyward data flowing through Suite 2, is that right?
Right. Yep.
And is that in production?
That's production. We've had that in production for several years now. So it's a lot of work to get a SIS stood up. I know we talk about APIs and the standard and all that. So there's a lot of mapping that has to be done because each SIS is very dynamic. I guess they need to be able to meet the needs of a lot of districts. And then the purpose of Ed5 is to bring everything in a standard. So like Quita and Aaron and all were saying that, when you come back in, we want to try and make sure we do our conversions and import into the same field so that, we're all talking the same thing. And when we do share visualizations or analytics or anything else to the community, what works for us works for everyone else and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to say thank you to our panelists, Brian, Laquita, Daniel, and Aaron.